Why do most people never think critically? Why is it that in a world drowning in information, with access to every fact, every study, every voice, the majority of us still walk through life on autopilot, repeating slogans, absorbing opinions, parroting what we've heard without ever truly questioning? The numbers are shocking. As of March 2025, analyses from both Insight Assessment and even online communities dissecting hoaxes reported the same disturbing truth. Only about 14 to 14. 5% of adults demonstrate proficient critical thinking skills. That means nearly 9 out of 10 people you pass on the street are operating without this ability. Think about that. 9 out of 10. And it gets worse. A 2025 study from Phys.org revealed that reliance on AI correlates negatively with critical thinking scores, an astonishing correlation of 0.68. The more people outsource their thinking to machines, the less capable they become of wrestling with reality themselves. We are delegating the one thing that makes us human, our ability to reason, to doubt, to weigh evidence, to something that was never meant to carry our responsibility for truth. But maybe the most damning statistic comes from a 2023 Intelligence Studies review, still being discussed today. Only 4% of people think intentionally by choice. 4 out of 100. Everyone else is swept up in habits, emotions, and scripts handed down to them. If this isn't a hidden war on your mind, what else would you call it? And yet, this isn't an accident. Society conditions you not to think. Schools drill you in memorization, but punish you for asking the wrong questions. Media rewards you for outrage, not reflection. Social networks pull you into tribal loyalty, not independent inquiry. Critical thinking is rare precisely because it threatens those who profit from obedience. So here's the raw truth. If you don't fight for your own mind, someone else will own it. The question is, do you even notice it happening? Or are you, like most, trapped in the cave of shadows, mistaking flickers on the wall for reality itself? Critical thinking isn't rare because people are stupid. It's rare because people avoid pain. Thinking critically is not a passive act. It is labor. As Psychology Today pointed out in September 2024, the human brain is built to conserve energy, and deep thinking is one of the most energy-intensive activities you can perform. Your body resists it the way it resists a long uphill climb. It's easier to let assumptions guide you, easier to trust intuition, easier to obey the crowd. And when the world is stressful, and it always is, emotions take the wheel. A 2024 article by Jean Prazzoli laid it bare. Fear, anger, anxiety, these override rational analysis and drive us straight into confirmation bias. We choose the stories that soothe us, the beliefs that shield us, the headlines that affirm what we already want to think. The Open University's research on barriers to reasoning lists this as one of the most common traps. We protect our feelings, even if it means sacrificing truth. Groupthink makes it even worse. A 2023 PMC review of human decision-making confirmed what philosophers have been warning for centuries. Heuristics, shortcuts, and conformity guide most choices. People don't just avoid critical thinking individually, they suppress it collectively, because questioning too much risks exile from the group. The herd mentality Nietzsche despised isn't a metaphor. It's our default mode of survival. Add in self-deception, and the cage becomes invisible. As Concordia University's research emphasized, most people lack epistemological awareness. They don't even realize they're building their lives on assumptions that have never been tested. To face reality fully means tearing down illusions you may have lived with for decades. And that hurts. So ask yourself this: if truth feels like fire on the skin, how many people will step into the flames willingly? Almost none. That's why critical thinking is a rebellion against our own biology. It is uncomfortable, slow, and isolating, but maybe that's exactly why it's the only path to freedom. Plato gave us the perfect image centuries ago, the allegory of the cave. People chained to a wall, staring at shadows, believing those shadows are reality itself. That wasn't just philosophy, it was prophecy. Most people today live in that cave. The shadows are headlines, TikTok clips, AI-generated summaries, and partisan soundbites. And the chains? They're the comforts of conformity and the fear of isolation. Step outside that cave and you risk ridicule, loneliness, even hostility. Because people don't want their illusions challenged. They'd rather you nod along and keep the peace than hold up a mirror. Nietzsche warned us about this herd instinct. Society worships comfort and punishes anyone who shatters the shared illusion. Question too much and you're branded negative, arrogant, or conspiratorial. It's not about truth, it's about control. Even education, the very institution that claims to liberate minds, often does the opposite. As the Critical Thinking Institute argued in February 2024, schools reward rote memorization, not genuine inquiry. You pass by regurgitating what the teacher wants, not by asking why the teacher believes it. And when censorship enters the classroom, as studies from Buffalo University magazine in 2023 exposed, the cave only deepens. Children aren't being taught to see reality, they're being conditioned to accept shadows. The philosopher Immanuel Kant called this condition self-imposed immaturity. We surrender our capacity for judgment because it's easier to let someone else decide for us. We become obedient consumers of pre-packaged truths. As Kant put it, the path to enlightenment requires courage, the courage to use your own reason without guidance. So here's the brutal truth. You're surrounded by illusions that were designed for you. Media corporations profit when you stay outraged, governments profit when you stay compliant, and algorithms profit when you stay distracted. The cave is not just an allegory, it's your daily life. The only question is, will you tear off the chains, or will you keep mistaking shadows for the sun? Why do most people never escape the herd? Because belonging feels safer than truth. Nietzsche wrote that man would rather will nothingness than risk standing alone, and he was right. The herd offers security, validation, identity. It offers you the illusion that if everyone believes it, it must be true. That illusion is intoxicating, and so people cling to it, even if it means silencing the small voice inside that says, this doesn't add up. But the herd is a cage. Look at the numbers again. Only 14% of adults can think critically. The rest are reinforced daily by groupthink. The 2023 review in PMC proved that when faced with choices, people lean on heuristics and mimicry far more than independent analysis. If the group leans left, they lean left. If the group leans right, they lean right. If the group screams, they scream louder. And they call it being informed. Modern culture amplifies this trap. Social media is not designed for thought. It's designed for mimicry and outrage. Platforms feed you content that aligns with your tribe, deepening confirmation bias and cutting you off from real dialogue. The New York Times in May 2025 highlighted how algorithms don't just polarize, they flatten thought into binary extremes. There is no nuance, no subtlety, no room for Socratic questioning. Just camps, just loyalty. And loyalty is the opposite of truth. When your allegiance is to the herd, you will swallow lies to keep your place in the circle. You will rationalize contradictions because losing the group feels worse than losing your mind. That's why Nietzsche despised the herd. It doesn't care about growth, about the individual spirit. It cares only about sameness. So the herd applauds conformity and punishes clarity. It locks you in a cage where obedience feels like freedom. And here's the horror. Most people not only accept this, they celebrate it. They call it belonging. They call it identity. But it's slavery with a smile. Here's the truth no one in power wants spoken. Critical thinking is dangerous. Not dangerous for you, dangerous for them. A questioning mind doesn't just ask what is happening, it asks why and who benefits. And those two questions threaten entire systems. That's why society, from cradle to grave, conditions you not to think deeply. Education is the first battlefield. As the Critical Thinking Institute noted in 2024, schools prioritize obedience and rote memorization over curiosity. You're rewarded for repeating answers, not challenging premises. By the time you leave school, your brain is trained to seek approval, not truth. Then media takes over. A 2024 AFA.net study showed how broadcast systems thrive on keeping people passive and polarized. Outrage sells. Division glues eyeballs to the screen. If you thought critically, you might turn it off. You might walk away. And that's the last thing they want. Even AI, the very tool sold as empowering, is eroding your ability to think. A Microsoft research paper from January 2025 documented how people now offload reasoning tasks to AI, cognitive outsourcing that weakens their natural ability to analyze. Pair that with the negative correlation between AI usage and critical thinking scores reported in 2025, and the picture is clear. The more you rely on machines, the more your own critical faculties atrophy. This isn't liberation, it's dependency. But why does society fear your mind? Because independent thinkers are ungovernable. They don't swallow the official narrative. They don't panic on command. They don't fall neatly into political camps. They don't buy the products they're told to buy. They're harder to manipulate, harder to herd, harder to silence. That is a nightmare for leaders who depend on mass obedience. So the machinery of culture, education, media, algorithms, even technology itself doesn't just fail to teach critical thinking, it actively suppresses it. Not because it's useless, but because it's too powerful. And in a world where power thrives on your submission, the most radical act you can commit is to reclaim your own mind. What happens when a society stops thinking? The answer is not abstract. It's measurable, brutal, and already unfolding. Psychology Today warned in May 2021, and it's only more urgent now, that without critical thinking, people make poor decisions in every domain. Finances, health, relationships, politics. Look around in 2025. Misinformation spreads faster than truth. Polarization replaces dialogue, and manipulation has become the default mode of governance. The cost is personal first. If you cannot think critically, you will be manipulated. You will spend money you don't have on things you don't need. You will vote for people who despise you. You will fight wars that aren't yours. You will mistake propaganda for wisdom, and you will defend lies as if your identity depends on it. Because in a way it does. When you've built yourself out of borrowed beliefs, truth feels like a threat. But the cost is also civilizational. Pew Research in 2021 projected that as critical faculties decline, societies slide toward binary extremes. You can see it now, everything framed as good versus evil, left versus right, believer versus skeptic. This simplification doesn't just kill nuance, it kills democracy itself. A people who cannot analyze, who cannot weigh evidence, who cannot resist their own biases, will inevitably surrender freedom for comfort. And then there's the creeping influence of AI. Business AI's 2025 analysis warned that passive dependence on algorithms accelerates this decline, amplifying echo chambers and filtering reality until we mistake tailored feeds for objective truth. Add to that the Microsoft findings on cognitive offloading, where thinking tasks are simply handed over to machines, and you see the price we're paying. Atrophy of the very muscles that once defined human progress. So the cost of not thinking critically is nothing less than the collapse of autonomy. Without it, you are programmable, you are consumable, you are disposable. The question isn't whether we can afford to think critically, it's whether we can afford not to. If the herd is the cage, then how do you break free? It begins with a brutal admission. You are not as rational as you think. None of us are. Concordia University's work on self-deception made it clear. Most people operate with blind spots they cannot see until forced to confront them. So the first step is humility. You have to admit you've been living in Plato's cave, staring at shadows, mistaking comfort for truth. Without that admission, nothing changes. The second step is practice. Critical thinking is not a gift, it's a discipline. Stanford research in 2015, later reinforced by a 2025 Frontiers in Education study, showed that repeated engagement with data-driven decision-making in labs measurably improves reasoning skills. This isn't about IQ, it's about training the mind the way an athlete trains the body. Question assumptions, test ideas, demand evidence, think for yourself even when it hurts. But practice must be personal. As Scripps and the University of Florida argued in 2024, independence in problem solving, working through challenges without outsourcing to authority, is essential. That means reading beyond your tribe, analyzing viewpoints you despise, forcing yourself to ask, what if I'm wrong? The Socratic method wasn't just about dialogue, it was about dismantling your own illusions, one question at a time. And then comes mindfulness. Kirshner's 2025 work on the science of teaching emphasized that awareness is key to resisting biases. Mindfulness practices and even cognitive behavioral techniques can help you pause before reacting, notice your confirmation bias, and choose reason over instinct. This is not weakness, it's control. Finally, break the chain of silence. NASPA's August 2025 findings showed that inclusive questioning and hybrid discussions, where all voices challenge each other, Create environments that foster genuine critical thought. Critical thinking doesn't thrive in isolation. It thrives in communities of independent minds, each sharpening the other like steel against steel. The chains are real, but they're not unbreakable. You break them every time you pause before reacting, every time you question before believing, every time you choose the discomfort of thought over the comfort of the herd. That is the beginning of freedom. Freedom isn't just a political slogan, it's a mental discipline. Kant called it enlightenment. The courage to use your own reason without guidance. That's not a poetic phrase, it's a warning. Because if you can't think for yourself, you are not free. You're just an obedient body wearing the costume of autonomy. Critical thinking is the training ground for freedom. It demands you wrestle with reality rather than let someone else hand it to you pre-packaged. That wrestling is hard. It's uncomfortable. It strips away illusions you may have inherited from family, culture, religion, or politics. But without that stripping away, you are not an individual. You are a vessel filled with other people's voices. Nietzsche took it further. He warned that over-rationalism itself can become another trap, a sterile worship of logic that kills the vitality of life. His point wasn't to reject reason, but to use it as a weapon for life affirmation, not as a cage. Critical thinking, then, is not cold analysis alone. It's the fusion of courage and clarity. It's logic in service of truth, not in service of conformity. And here's the raw paradox. Freedom feels heavier than obedience. When you leave the herd, you lose its comfort. When you walk out of Plato's cave, the light blinds you. When you refuse to offload your choices onto algorithms or authorities, you bear the full weight of responsibility. That weight is terrifying, but it is also the only proof you are alive. The Capable blog in 2025 put it bluntly. Intuitive heuristics and groupthink will always be easier than deliberate reasoning. But easier is not the same as better. Easy is the path to slavery. Difficult is the path to freedom. And freedom, real freedom, isn't granted. It's fought for inside your own skull every single day. So the discipline of freedom isn't glamorous. It's grueling. But it's also the one discipline that separates a conscious human being from a programmable machine. And in a world tilting further toward automation and manipulation, that discipline is no longer optional. It's survival. The greatest enemy of critical thinking isn't the government, the media, or even artificial intelligence. It's you. Your own mind is the battlefield. Your emotions, your laziness, your biases, they fight against clarity every single day. The war isn't out there, it's inside. Think about confirmation bias. You already know the feeling. That little surge of pleasure when you read something that confirms what you believe. That isn't truth. It's dopamine. Your brain rewards you for protecting your ego, not for uncovering reality. As Fizz.org reported in January 2025, even the smartest people sabotage their own reasoning when comfort is on the line. Add AI into the mix, and the temptation to outsource that discomfort skyrockets. Why wrestle with complexity when a machine will spit out an answer in seconds? But every time you surrender that struggle, you weaken the very muscle of thought. Stress compounds the problem. Psychology Today in September 2024 highlighted how under pressure, humans default to emotion over logic. Fear narrows your vision, anger blinds you, stress turns analysis into instinct. And instinct is rarely truth, it's survival. That's why propaganda is always emotional. That's why outrage spreads faster than nuance, because they bypass reason and hijack the nervous system directly. And then there's self-deception. Concordia's research showed how most people lack awareness of their own epistemological limits. They don't know what they don't know. Worse, they invent explanations to protect themselves from ever having to face that void. Self-deception is the perfect prison, because you don't even know you're locked inside. This is why the fight for critical thinking is nothing less than a war against yourself. You have to be willing to suffer the sting of doubt, the burn of uncertainty, the humiliation of being wrong. You have to kill the part of you that would rather be comfortable than free. Because until you do, you will always be your own jailer. This is not just a lecture, it is a call to arms. Not with weapons, but with awareness. Not against governments or corporations, but against the creeping surrender of your own mind. If only 14% of adults today can think critically, then the battlefield is clear. 90% of the world has already laid down their arms, already traded independence for comfort, already chosen the cave over the sun. But here's the shock no one tells you. You don't need everyone to wake up. History shows it's always the minority, the few who dare to question, that ignite revolutions. The 4% who intentionally choose to think, who refuse to be lulled by dopamine, algorithms, or propaganda, are the ones who shape the future. The rest follow. The herd cannot lead itself. So what does this call to arms look like? It looks like practicing mindfulness so your biases don't hijack you. It looks like reading perspectives you hate just to sharpen your own. It looks like refusing to let AI do all your thinking, using it as a tool but never as a replacement. It looks like cultivating communities where honest questioning is not only allowed but demanded, as the NASPA research in 2025 proved leads to stronger minds. It looks like taking full responsibility for your judgments, even when they isolate you, even when they hurt. This is the hidden war on your mind, and neutrality is not an option. If you don't fight for your ability to think, someone else will think for you. If you don't guard your reason, the herd will drag you back into the cave and chain you to the wall. So ask yourself, will you join the 4%? Will you carry the weight of freedom in your own skull, even when it burns, even when it costs? Because that choice, your choice, might be the only thing standing between a society of free individuals and a society of programmable drones. The war is here. The chains are visible. The door to the cave is open. Walk out or stay in the dark.